There is a side of a man that almost no one sees. Not even his friends, not even his mother. It is the version of himself that only awakens in the presence of the one, the woman who does not chase, does not fix, does not plead. She simply is. Calm, whole, undemanding. And in her stillness, his walls begin to fall. Not because she tried to enter him, but because her presence invited him to return to himself. What if you understood that the truest measure of a man's love is not what he says when he desires you, but what he becomes when he respects you? Most women never see this side of him. Not because he's hiding it from the world, but because only 1% of women make it safe enough for him to reveal it. And it has nothing to do with how you look. It has everything to do with how you live. What follows are 9 things a man only does for the one. And if you've never seen this, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because the path to his depth begins not by reaching toward him, but by returning to yourself. Welcome to Shi Heng Yi mindset, your space for calm, wisdom-based guidance on self-mastery and relationships. Remember the name of our channel, Shi Heng Yi mindset, the only official source of calm, wisdom-based guidance. Beware of fake channels copying our voice. Stay aware. Stay true. Let's begin. There is a side of a man that cannot be accessed through appearance, charm, or even words. It is a space deep inside his being that remains untouched by casual affection and unreachable by superficial behavior. This space is governed not by logic, but by energy, by presence, and more than anything else by safety, emotional safety. While many speak of a man's desire to pursue beauty, what he ultimately surrenders to is not visual, it is felt. It is the silent invitation of a woman whose energy does not threaten his nervous system, but calms it. Whose gaze does not try to measure or control him, but simply sees. And most women, despite their effort, their giving, and even their love, never access this level of a man. Because what invites him to unfold is not performance, it is presence. There is a difference between a man being with a woman and a man unfolding for a woman. Many can hold hands, few can hold space. The deepest parts of a man do not open when he is impressed, excited, or even physically attracted. They open only when his nervous system finds rest. And rest is rare in today's world. When a man is with a woman who radiates emotional volatility, constant demands, or unpredictable moods, even if she is beautiful, his instinct is to protect himself, not her. The body interprets threat not in words, but in tension. And so his muscles tighten, his mind retreats, his emotions shut down. He becomes a version of himself that is partially there, but not fully alive. He may stay physically. He may provide. He may even commit in name. But the part of him that can love without armor, that part sleeps. Because love and danger do not coexist in the same body. Emotional safety does not mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of regulation. A man does not need perfection, but he cannot relax in the company of chaos. Even if it is subtle, even if it is hidden behind a smile. The human nervous system, particularly the masculine nervous system, is wired for external threat detection. In earlier times, this served him in battle and survival, but in relationships, this wiring can misfire. If his partner's energy is scattered, unensured, or reactive, he begins to interpret love as danger, and this interpretation often happens below his awareness. He won't say it out loud. He might not even know it himself. He'll just feel tired in your presence. He'll seek escape. He'll become irritable, or worse, indifferent. And many women, sensing this shift, try to compensate. They speak more, give more, do more, not realizing that what he needs is not more of them, but less pressure, less intensity, less energetic noise. He needs the opposite of force. He needs peace. The kind of peace that comes from a woman who is anchored in herself, not in his attention, not in the relationship status, but in herself. A woman who knows her worth without having to perform it. A woman who can listen without needing to fix. Who can feel without drowning in feeling. Who can be present without turning everything into a test of affection. She is not emotionally neutral. She is emotionally grounded. And it is this groundedness that acts like a lighthouse to a man who has been battling waves all day. He may be strong. He may be accomplished. But when he is with her, he can put the sword down. Not because she demands it, but because he no longer needs it. This is the woman for whom a man brings out his hidden self. Not because she asked him to open up, but because he felt safe enough to do so. The safety of her presence became more powerful than the walls of his past. And this is not something that happens with time. It happens with energy. You can know a man for years and never meet his soul. Or you can sit beside him in silence for 10 minutes, and in your stillness, he starts to speak truths he's never said before. Not because you pulled them from him, but because your energy gave him permission. There is a reason that only a few women ever experience this version of a man. It's not because he didn't love others. It's because most women were too loud with their energy, too anxious to be chosen, too eager to be everything. And in their striving, they created tension instead of trust. A man can sense when a woman is trying to mold him into her fantasy. He can feel when she is speaking from fear, not clarity. He knows when she is using affection to secure a role rather than to share a moment. And so he protects himself, not by running, but by staying half present. True emotional safety feels like still water. It doesn't try to impress, manipulate, or overwhelm. It simply offers space. And in that space, a man finds his truth. He may laugh deeper. He may cry for the first time. He may begin to speak about his childhood, his failures, or his secret fears. Not because he is weak, but because, for once, he doesn't have to pretend. And for a man, this freedom is addictive. He will travel across cities, break his own patterns, and risk rejection just to be near the woman who gave him this feeling. Because peace, when real, is rare, and men do not let go of what gives them peace. To become this kind of woman is not about silence or softness. It is about regulation. If you can breathe through discomfort, he will share discomfort with you. If you can sit with your own pain without projecting it onto him, he will trust you with his own pain. If you can stay grounded when he is distant, he will return, not out of guilt, but out of gravity. Because men are drawn not to perfection, but to energy that feels like home. And once you become this energy, you stop needing to chase. You no longer perform to keep him interested. You no longer analyze every word or wonder where you stand. Because you know, if a man can exhale in your presence, he will keep coming back. Not for your body, but for your essence. Not for entertainment, but for peace. And peace is something no man forgets. There is another side to this that few speak about. It is the hidden reality of vulnerability in men. In a world where strength is expected and softness is mocked, many men carry their wounds in silence. They were told to be providers, not feelers. To act, not speak. And over time, this conditioning created a shell around their emotions. A shell that only a rare kind of woman can soften, but only if she resists the urge to force it open. Men do not reveal their hearts in response to interrogation. They reveal them in response to presence, and presence is not passive. It is deeply alive, intensely aware, but without pressure. When a man senses that he can make mistakes in your presence and still be loved, not because you ignore them, but because you see the man beneath them, he begins to lower his guard, slowly, not in speeches, but in moments. He may suddenly admit he's tired. He may sit closer to you without reason. He may do small things he never did before. Clean the kitchen. Remember something you said in passing. Ask about your past. These are not accidents. These are signs of softening, signs of safety taking root. And once safety takes root, depth becomes inevitable. Stillness then becomes your most powerful language. Not silence, but stillness. The ability to remain in your center when he is out of his. The wisdom to observe without reacting. To hear without assuming. To witness his process without turning it into a personal offense. When you master this, you begin to see a side of him that even he forgot was there. The side that yearns to be seen, not as a man with answers, but as a human with feelings. And when he feels seen, not judged, not fixed, but truly seen, he begins to reveal. You will not need to ask for honesty. It will arrive uninvited. You will not need to beg for closeness. He will create it. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence became the one place where he could stop performing. And this is the one thing a man longs for more than admiration, more than sex, more than even success. To be loved without the armor. To be held without needing to hold it all together. To be safe in the presence of someone who is safe in themselves. This is why stillness is not weakness. It is power without force. It is leadership without control. It is the quiet strength that says, I do not need to push, because what is meant for me will unfold when I am aligned. And in this alignment, you become rare, not because of how you look, but because of how you feel. Because in a world of urgency and reaction, your groundedness becomes unforgettable. You become the woman he cannot explain, but cannot forget. And so, let us not ask how to get a man to open up. Let us ask how to become the kind of woman he feels safe opening to. Let us not chase vulnerability. Let us become the presence that invites it. Let us not fear his distance. Let us become the calm that draws him near. And above all, let us remember, what opens a man is not pressure. It is peace. And peace begins with you. A man may entertain many, but he protects only one. And not because she demands it, but because something within him decides that she is worth guarding. This instinct, though ancient, remains alive in every man. It exists not only in the body, but in the energy. It awakens when he no longer sees her as optional. He begins to shield her not just from harm, but from unnecessary chaos, from petty drama, from energetic intrusion. This protection is not always loud. It may not come with grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes it is found in how he adjusts his tone around her, in how he speaks up when someone disrespects her, even in subtle ways, in how he keeps certain things private, because he knows not everything belongs in their shared space. What many overlook is that protection from a man is not just a masculine reflex. It is a reflection of reverence. A man who feels responsible for your peace is a man who sees your value beyond the surface. He recognizes that your well-being is not separate from his, that your emotional safety is connected to his leadership, not because he sees you as fragile, but because he sees you as sacred. And sacred things are not left exposed. Sacred things are not handled casually. Sacred things are not brought into disorder. When a man sees a woman as sacred, he organizes himself around her, not out of submission, but out of devotion. But this sense of devotion does not arise randomly. It is not triggered by infatuation or temporary pleasure. It is born when a man feels he is with someone irreplaceable, a woman who doesn't compete for his protection, but commands it through her energy. A woman who is not reckless with herself, who walks with self-respect as naturally as she breathes. Her boundaries are not barriers, they are a signal. A signal that says, I don't need to be saved, but I refuse to be disrespected. And this quiet self-honoring awakens something ancient in a man. It stirs his integrity. It reminds him of his role, not as a controller, but as a protector. There's a story of a man who was used to being admired. Women loved his charisma, his ambition, his presence. He was polite, but emotionally distant, until he met a woman who did not try to win him. She did not flatter him. She did not chase him. She observed. She listened. She carried herself like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. When he cancelled plans, she didn't argue. She simply became less available. When he complimented her beauty, she thanked him and redirected the conversation to values. When he asked about her past, she shared what she chose, not what he demanded, and slowly something shifted in him. Not out of guilt or pressure, but realization. He began to respect her more than anyone else, because she respected herself. And one day, he found himself speaking to a group of friends who joked about her in his absence. Without raising his voice, he stopped the conversation, not because she was present, but because something in him could not bear the idea of her being dishonored. That's protection, not driven by fear, but by reverence. True protection is not loud, it is steady. A man may open doors, but if he lets the world walk over her heart, it is not protection. Real protection means emotional covering. It means managing his own habits so they don't bring harm into the relationship. It means addressing his own wounds so he doesn't bleed on her spirit. It means making decisions with her well, being in mind, even when she's not looking. And most importantly, it means choosing her in rooms she'll never enter, speaking well of her, defending her when it's inconvenient, honoring her name in places where it would be easy to be silent. Protection then becomes the visible echo of internal alignment, and it shows itself when a man feels that the woman beside him is not only his partner, but his mirror. She reflects his higher self. She reflects the kind of man he knows he can be, and because of that, he becomes fiercely careful. Not because she is weak, but because her presence makes him strong. To protect something is to declare, "This matters to me." And men protect what they do not want to lose. Yet it must also be said, a man cannot protect what a woman herself does not value. If she treats her time as disposable, he will not guard it. If she tolerates being spoken to with disregard, he will not correct others who do the same. If she overextends herself for love, he will expect her sacrifice. This is not cruelty, it is reflection. A man responds to the cues a woman sets with her own behavior. He listens not only to her words, but to how she treats herself. Because that is where her true standard lies. Not in what she asks, but in what she allows. This brings us to a quiet truth. Many avoid a man's effort is a mirror of a woman's self-respect. If she lives from neediness, he senses it. If she lives from fullness, he honors it. The way she holds herself creates an energetic blueprint. It teaches him how to approach her, how to speak to her, how to value her. And men, consciously or not, are always listening to this frequency. He may not understand the language of emotional needs, but he understands the energy of a woman who values herself. In practice, this means no longer just asking, "Why isn't he treating me well?" but asking, "Where have I trained him to?" Not through blame, but through awareness. Every time a woman forgives without healing, stays without clarity, gives without balance, she teaches. She teaches that her presence can be taken for granted. And in doing so, she becomes emotionally replaceable. Not because she is not enough, but because she is not aligned with her own worth. And no man can give to a woman what she refuses to give to herself. Self-respect is quiet but unmistakable. It is in how she speaks to herself in his absence. It is in how she takes time to nourish her own life. Her passions, her friendships, her physical well-being. It is in how she doesn't abandon her center to earn a place in his. And this alignment creates contrast, a contrast that is deeply attractive, because it shows a man that she is with him by choice, not dependency, that her love is a gift, not a demand, that her presence is not an accident, but an invitation into a deeper way of living. There's another story worth sharing. A woman who had spent years in relationships where she was always overextending, always initiating, always trying to prove she was the one. Until one day, after deep reflection, she chose a different path. In her next connection, she moved slower. She listened more to her inner state than his words. When he didn't show consistency, she didn't confront him. She simply retracted her energy. She allowed space to speak for itself. And when he returned with sincerity, she welcomed it, but not from need, from clarity. Over time, he began to show up differently, not just with gifts or messages, but with presence, with intentionality. Because she no longer taught him that love must be earned through effort, she modeled that love must be matched by energy. And this shift in dynamic created safety, not only for her, but for him. Because when a man is with a woman who values herself, he feels direction. He is no longer navigating ambiguity. He knows what is acceptable and what is not through lectures, but through her embodiment. And this helps him rise. Men rise in the presence of aligned women, not because she tells him who to be, but because her standard acts like a mirror. And in that mirror, he sees either a match or a misalignment. When a man is in the presence of a woman who lives her truth, he may feel challenged, but it is not a challenge to dominate. It is a challenge to grow. He starts to reflect more, to question his own behaviors, to pay attention to how his presence affects hers. And in doing so, he becomes accountable, not because she forced it, but because her energy gave no other option. A woman who walks in self-respect changes the weather around her. Men either rise to meet her frequency or leave to find comfort in lower vibration, and both outcomes serve her peace. This does not mean she is inflexible. It means she is rooted. She can bend without breaking. She can forgive without forgetting her value. She can give without abandoning herself. And this creates a foundation for real partnership. Because a woman who honors herself teaches a man how to honor love. She teaches him that effort is not extra. It is expected. That presence is not performance. It is the base requirement. That protection is not optional. It is an organic result of emotional investment. There is something sacred that happens when a woman returns to herself, when she no longer asks, "What do I need to do to be chosen?" but instead asks, "How can I honor myself so fully that the right one has no choice but to see me?" And this shift rewires everything. Suddenly, her relationships no longer revolve around proving. They revolve around aligning. She is no longer seduced by promises. She observes patterns. She no longer melts at attention. She observes intention. She no longer waits to be claimed. She knows she is already complete. And in this completeness, something beautiful unfolds. A man who is ready will see her, not as a possession, not as a conquest, but as a counterpart. And he will move differently. He will show up with clarity, not confusion. With consistency, not chaos. With protection, not passivity. Because she has taught him, through her way of being, what kind of man she is worthy of. It begins with energy. It continues with alignment. It manifests through relationship, and it transforms both people, not just into partners, but into versions of themselves they had only glimpsed before. All because she decided that her love was not for sale. It was for those who could match its depth. There is something misunderstood about the way men connect to purpose in relationships. Many believe that the masculine seeks control, or that the more dominant a man is, the more he wants to lead everything, including her. But this is not how depth works. This is not how true connection reveals itself between two energies aligned in awareness. The masculine does not seek control as its highest aim. It seeks purpose. And in the context of love, a man does not want to be controlled, nor does he wish to control. What he longs for is a mission, something to build with, someone to build for, a direction to pour himself into where his actions mean something beyond survival or status. When a man is with a woman who tries to mold him, fix him, or parent him, she unknowingly strips him of the very function that makes him thrive. He no longer feels like the architect of his life. He becomes the object of her correction. And this shift, though subtle, is fatal to intimacy. Because the moment a man feels managed, his energy withdraws. He begins to protect his sovereignty, even at the cost of emotional connection. This isn't ego. This is biology. The masculine instinct is deeply wired to seek autonomy within partnership. It desires to offer, not be offered instructions. And when a woman shifts from inspiration to control, from collaboration to direction, the man no longer sees her as his complement. He begins to see her as a container. There is a story of a man whose partner constantly advised him on everything: what to wear, how to speak, when to make calls, how to behave in front of her friends. Her intentions were not cruel. In her mind, she was helping, but what she didn't see was the silent erosion of his essence. He started to speak less. He deferred to her opinions not because he agreed, but because it was easier than defending his own. Over time, he felt less like a partner and more like a project. And eventually, even though there was love, he left. Not because he didn't care, but because he no longer recognized himself in the relationship. He lost the freedom to lead. Freedom is not the opposite of love. It is the condition under which love grows. A man must feel internally free to show up fully. And the woman who inspires him most is not the one who organizes his behavior, but the one who honors his agency. She does not tell him what to do. She makes it safe for him to think, to try, to fail, and to rise again. She does not mother him, nor does she wait for him to become a fantasy. She sees him for what he is now, and in that seeing, something sacred awakens. He feels respected, and respect is the masculine's gateway to love. Respect is not flattery. It is not praise. It is how she holds herself in his presence. It is how she receives what he offers and what she does not demand. A woman who truly understands this does not abandon her standards. She elevates them by allowing a man to meet them through action, not correction. She does not give advice every time he's vulnerable. She listens. She does not interrupt his process with judgment. She trusts, and she does not make his transformation her responsibility. She walks her own path with such clarity that he is invited, not coerced, to rise beside her. In this way, a woman becomes a reflection, not a referee. She reflects his highest potential simply by how she lives. Her alignment becomes his direction. Her patience becomes his confidence, and her grace becomes the space in which he evolves. This is not passive. It is deeply active on a spiritual level, because it takes great inner strength for a woman to resist the urge to interfere. It takes discipline to sit with the discomfort of watching a man grow at his own pace. And it takes wisdom to know that control brings compliance, but presence brings transformation. A man inspired is a man in motion. You will know when he feels this because he begins to take initiative. He no longer waits to be told. He starts to anticipate. He studies her without being prompted. He shows up without needing to be reminded. And when she speaks, he listens, not out of fear, but out of respect for the way she carries herself. This is the result of inspiration, not instruction. It is the natural fruit of being with a woman who does not dim her light to accommodate his shadow, nor does she attack his shadow to prove her light. She simply shines, and in doing so, she teaches without words. There is a quiet wisdom in allowing a man to be responsible for his own evolution, not to abandon him in his chaos, but to stand firm in the clarity of your own alignment. When he sees that you will not bend to dysfunction, but also will not shame him for his process. He feels trusted. And trust is the seed of responsibility. A man who feels trusted begins to trust himself, and when he trusts himself, he leads, not to dominate, but to serve the union with direction, effort, and strength. But when a man feels like every action is being monitored, graded, or second-guessed, he reverts. His decisions lose power. He avoids responsibility because he associates it with criticism. He shrinks not because he lacks strength, but because he is in an environment that punishes his imperfection more than it supports his potential. And in this environment, love becomes labor. He begins to hide parts of himself. He lies not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. He no longer brings his whole self because his whole self was never truly welcomed. It's important to recognize how often this dynamic is unintentional. Many women who fall into the pattern of micromanagement do so from fear, not control. Fear that if they do not guide him, he will fail. Fear that if they don't speak, he won't understand. Fear that silence means powerlessness. But true power does not live in constant direction. It lives in grounded stillness, in the unwavering conviction that your clarity, your boundaries, your energy are enough to inspire movement. Imagine a woman standing at the edge of a forest, holding a lantern. She does not yell into the trees, demanding someone find her. She does not chase after the sound of broken twigs. She simply stands quiet, visible, clear. And the man, wandering in confusion, sees the light, and because of her stillness, because of her consistency, he moves toward it. Not because she told him to, but because her presence made direction possible. This is the feminine in her highest function, not as savior, but as signal. Men do not build under pressure. They build under inspiration. Give a man a reason, and he will provide. Give him space, and he will expand. Give him purpose, and he will lead. Not always perfectly, not always quickly, but authentically. Because when a man chooses to lead from his own desire, the foundation is stronger than anything built through compliance. He is no longer performing. He is living. This is the essence of masculine energy, direction. But direction cannot exist where there is no room to move. And if a woman fills every space with her opinions, fears, and corrections, he has no ground on which to lay his plans. This doesn't mean a woman must be silent. It means she must be conscious. Conscious of when her energy nurtures and when it invades. Conscious of when her advice comes from love and when it comes from insecurity. Conscious of when her giving is pure and when it is rooted in a desire to control outcomes. To embody this awareness requires self-work. It requires a deep relationship with one's own center. A woman cannot inspire a man's leadership if she is constantly abandoning her own. She must first learn to trust her intuition, to regulate her emotions without projecting them, to observe before reacting, and most importantly, to release the illusion that love means managing another's process. Love, in its highest form, is acceptance plus alignment. Acceptance of who he is, alignment with who you are, and trust that the bridge between those two truths will either build or reveal a path to something truer. There was once a woman who loved deeply, but always found herself exhausted in her relationships. She realized, after many heartbreaks, that she had been pouring all of her energy into molding her partners, trying to fix their habits, correct their mistakes, accelerate their growth. But in doing so, she became a mother, not a lover, a guide, not a mirror. One day, she decided to live differently. She made a quiet vow to love without managing, to stay soft without folding, to lead herself first. And in her next relationship, something shifted. She no longer offered advice unless asked. She no longer tried to motivate him through criticism. She simply lived her values. And to her surprise, he began to rise. He initiated conversations about his purpose. He asked her for feedback. He shared his inner world without being pressed. Because for the first time, he didn't feel pushed, he felt pulled. Not by pressure, but by presence. Presence is the most powerful force in a relationship. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply reveals what is real. And when a man is in the presence of a woman who leads herself, he either becomes more of who he truly is, or he leaves. Either way, clarity wins. And when clarity leads, peace follows. Peace does not come from having a partner who always agrees. Peace comes from knowing that you are not abandoning yourself in the name of love, that you are not shrinking your standards or sacrificing your sanity just to keep someone close, that you can witness someone's growth without tying your worth to their speed, and that you can inspire transformation not through effort, but through alignment. This is what a man truly needs. Not a woman who tells him what to be, but a woman who is so deeply herself that he remembers who he is. And from that remembering, he moves. Not because she forced it, but because she reminded him that he is free to build. And because of her stillness, he remembers that he is strong enough to lead. There are truths in a man that even he is not always willing to meet. Ones he has hidden so well that they don't bleed, but instead calcify into silence. Many men grow up in environments that train them to suppress the very currents that make them feel alive. From early childhood, they're often rewarded for being stoic, penalized for being soft, and silently taught that masculinity equals detachment from emotional honesty. Not by evil intent, but by legacy. Their fathers, their coaches, sometimes even their mothers, all mirroring the same message: vulnerability equals weakness. So when a man begins to let his guard down, truly down, not in words alone, but in trembling voice, in eyes that don't hold back tears, in a pause between confessions that tells you he's unsure if you'll still accept him afterward, it is not a gesture. It is a sacred revelation. You may think that intimacy for men is physical first, but for the one woman who touches something deeper, something ancient within him, that intimacy becomes emotional exposure. She does not demand it. She does not even ask for it. Her presence simply makes it safe for his walls to collapse, not all at once, but like layers of an old fortress beginning to open a gate. He lets her see the boy in him who still aches for affirmation, the teenager who failed and was never told it was okay, the man who made mistakes, carries regret like a weight on his chest, and has never dared to say it out loud. One of the quietest truths in relationships is this: a man's emotional honesty is not born from logic or timing. It emerges when his nervous system, his entire being, feels that it will not be punished for being real. This is not conscious. It is deeply physiological. When a man is with a woman who makes it feel safe to cry, to speak, to pause, to fail in front of her without losing her respect, something profound changes in his biology. His stress hormones decrease. Cortisol drops. His vagus nerve begins to regulate. The body, which remembers trauma long after the mind forgets, starts to soften. And in that softness, the man can show her what no one else sees, not even his friends. There's a moment you might witness where he stares into the distance and tells you about the time he felt like he disappointed his mother, or the dream he gave up because no one believed in it, or the one night he drove around alone because he didn't want to go home, didn't want to feel anything, didn't know what he was searching for. And he'll look at you not for comfort, but to see. Will you still see him as strong? This vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it is the most courageous act he may ever offer, because he has built himself for so long on the idea that strength means not breaking. And in your arms, he is willing to break just a little to tell you, I trust you more than I trust the image I created for survival. A woman once shared a story about a man she loved deeply. He had always been calm, collected, organized, never too emotional. Until one night during a quiet dinner, she told him she saw pain in him, not because he looked sad, but because she had begun to feel it in her own chest when she looked at him. He paused. Something shifted in his eyes. And he said, "I don't know how to talk about it. I've always felt like I had to be the strong one. Even when I was 6, that night, he spoke about his father leaving, about how he blamed himself, about how even now, every time someone walks out, he quietly assumes it's his fault. This man was in his 40s, successful, admired, but in that moment, he was just a boy telling the truth he had buried under decades of becoming a man. When a man shows you his fears, it's not because he wants advice. It's because he wants you to hold the space for his soul to exhale. And many women miss this. They rush to fix. They try to encourage him. But what he truly needs in that moment is presence. Non-judgmental, grounded, patient presence. A presence that says, you don't have to be anyone here. You are enough even when you are hurting. And this reveals another dimension of intimacy most never talk about. The woman he shows this to is rare. Not because others were unworthy, but because few women know how to remain still while a man dismantles his armor. It's not easy. His fear may come out clumsily. His regret may sound like bitterness at first. His tears may arrive wrapped in silence, not sobs. But when she listens, not just with her ears, but with her full attention, she becomes something he has never had before, a sanctuary. In Eastern traditions, the feminine energy is not just seen as nurturing. It is seen as the grounding principle that allows the masculine to evolve. In her stillness, he finds clarity. In her acceptance, he finds the courage to change. This is not philosophical. It is psychological. A regulated nervous system becomes a mirror for another nervous system to attune. When her body is calm, it invites his body to stop bracing. And when his body stops bracing, his truth emerges. This is why the one woman he shows his emotional wounds to is not just loved. She is revered. He may not say it in poetic words, but in how he softens around her, in how he returns to her after conflict, in how he lets her see the parts of himself he was once ashamed of. These are signs of reverence, because the masculine does not expose its weakness to be pitied. It does so to feel whole. There is also a hidden paradox. The man who appears strongest outwardly is often the most emotionally fragile inwardly. Not weak, but fragile in that he has carried too much without release. So when he shows you his tiredness, his shame, his hidden guilt, do not be surprised if he quickly recoils afterward, unsure if he made a mistake. That recoil is his nervous system returning to its old programming. What matters is your response in that moment. If you shame him, he will never open again. If you try to push him to talk again too quickly, he will retreat. But if you simply breathe with him, hold his gaze, and let him feel your respect has not changed, he will remember that moment for the rest of his life. And sometimes, the way he shares these wounds is not verbal. It might be in a song he plays, a photograph he keeps, a movie scene that makes his throat tighten, and he doesn't know why. Pay attention. Emotional truth often arrives not in sentences but in symbols. The man who has loved deeply and lost, the man who failed and still carries the weight, the man who feels not enough but keeps giving his best. He is in front of you, hoping you will see past the presentation into the person. In one study on emotional intimacy between long-term couples, researchers discovered that the most bonded pairs were not those who communicated the most, but those who held space for emotional risk-taking. This means partners who allowed each other to be emotionally exposed without interruption. Fixing or deflection built the deepest, most resilient intimacy over time. The reason is biological. When vulnerability is welcomed, the brain releases oxytocin, the neurochemical of trust and connection. Over time, this repeated emotional safety actually reshapes attachment patterns. So, if you wonder why a man doesn't show this side of himself to most women, the answer is not that they were unimportant. It's that his body never reached a level of emotional safety with them. And that is not anyone's fault. It's a reflection of energetic chemistry. The alignment of emotional maturity, nervous system regulation, and mutual respect. When these three are present, emotional truth flows. But when only one is missing, say emotional maturity, then his vulnerability becomes too risky. If nervous system regulation is absent, he will feel too triggered. If mutual respect is broken, he will protect himself from being used or diminished. Therefore, when all three align in the presence of a woman who truly sees him, that space becomes holy. Not romantic in the ordinary sense, but sacred in the sense that it heals what was never named. He may never say the words, "You are the one." But when he allows you into the chambers of his emotional self, the ones guarded by silence, shaped by loss, and shielded by pride, what he is really saying is, "I have chosen you to witness me." And in a world where men are taught not to be seen emotionally, that is the greatest act of love he knows how to offer. When a man reveals these 9 things, not to the world, but only to one woman, it is not by accident. It is a consequence of deep emotional safety, mutual respect, and the subtle alchemy of energy exchange between two people who see each other beyond form and personality. What he gives in these quiet acts, his vulnerability, his protection, his deepest truths, is not a performance. It is an offering, one that is earned not through demand, but through the magnetic presence of a woman who understands her own worth without needing to announce it. When a woman learns to become a still point in a chaotic world, when she governs her emotions not through suppression, but through conscious discipline, when she chooses her words like an artist and her silences like a sage, she activates something ancient in the masculine. Not every man will see it, but the one who is ready, he will. And in seeing, he will begin to do things he has never done for any other. The truth is, connection is not built on attraction alone. It is built on resonance, on the silent, unmistakable knowing that this person meets me not on the surface, but in the core. The rarest form of love is not the loudest. It is the one that transforms without needing to control. The one that allows each to become more of themselves, not less. And so, for the woman who chooses to remain anchored in her own energy, who refines her presence instead of chasing approval, he will find himself doing things even he didn't know he was capable of. Not because she asked him to, but because in her presence, his soul whispered, "This is where I rise." If this message brought you clarity or strength, make sure to subscribe to Shi Heng Yi Mindset for more wisdom on relationships, emotional discipline, and self-mastery. Stay centered. Stay aware. Your transformation begins within.